I've had friends who live in this area have their garages and cars bashed in by bears. And of course, bears are attracted by often human activity, and that includes things like improper storage of garbage, not locking things down, excess unharvested fruit on fruit trees, and other activities which draw the bears down. And of course, that not only creates additional work for Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and what they do is, of course, they do relocate the bear, and they give the bear the opportunity, but all too often the bears come back, and then sometimes they do need to be put down. It's also very unhealthy for the bears. We've seen bears that have either been put down or died, and their stomach contents have plastic bags and cartons and all sorts of things that they got their hands on because of human interaction. So as we say, well, let's leave the wild areas to the bears. People will live in the developed areas, and let's make sure that we can reduce the number of interactions, and that will help the health of our wildlife and our bears, and of course also prevent property damage for people. When I took office, I set out to protect our public lands and our wildlife. We've expanded wildlife crossings across our state, decreasing vehicle collisions. We've increased public safety, reduced the cost of the accidents. Major investments in expanding availability of public land. Our Keep Colorado Wild Pass, the cost of a state park pass, will be going down from over $80 to $29 next year. We're very excited about that. And we continue to work to preserve all the great wildlife diversity that constitutes a big part of what keeps Colorado special. This Human-Bear Conflict Reduction Grant Program is a new program we launched to help communities and nonprofits invest in infrastructure and proven strategies to protect Coloradans and our property and bears. And of course, it also saves residents money and communities money. Money saved can be on damage to cars, on homes, trash cans, and much more. And this is money that local governments or individuals would otherwise have to spend to repair bear damage. And this is not unique to Boulder County. This is from Boulder County, the Roaring Fork Valley, to Durango, to Dolores, and more. Today we're announcing 11 grants that we are rolling out across our state. We expect that there will be funding for additional rounds of grants going forward, because many of these improvements will leave a lasting legacy and will be there for years to come, especially some of the physical improvements. And we look forward to continuing to engage additional communities around preventing bear damage and preventing bear-human interactions. Each of these grants is a bottom-up effort. Earlier I met the lady here in Boulder County who wrote this grant. These are all what's needed in each community. The grants awarded to Boulder County Parks and Open Space will benefit the towns of Lyons and Jamestown with 175 Barracuda bear-resistant garbage containers, electric fencing kits, chicken coops, and other ways and cameras to monitor the effectiveness of those improvements. In Durango, they're using the funds to provide bear-resistant trash cans for schools, the Ute Tribe campus, and the city of Durango itself. They're funding electric fencing around known bear attractions, areas where people have seen and bears visit, a bear enforcement officer, a fruit gleaning coordinator, and the coalition is also funding efforts to help people in the community better understand human-bear conflict and, just as importantly, how to avoid it in the future. In the Roaring Fork Valley in Eagle County, Colorado Parks and Wildlife is working with the Broad Coalition to fund bear-resistant garbage containers for public properties, incentivize removal of fruit-bearing trees on private property, and fund a regional bear-aware educational campaign. Those are just a few examples. I also want to congratulate Mineral County, where I just was a few days ago, the Community Fruit Rescue, Jeffco Bear Coalition, Town of Frisco, Town of Green Mountain Falls, Purgatory Watershed Partnership, Town of Dolores, and Utah Sanitation. This is more than just a few secure trash cans, but that's an important component of this work. It's really about how, especially as our population grows, we can live in greater harmony with the wildlife that call our state home. I want to thank the Department of Natural Resources, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, of course congratulate all 11 grant winners for their work to keep our communities and our wildlife safe. And with that, I'll turn it over to First Gentleman Marlon Reese.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Governor. I'm really glad to be here with you today. Colorado's spectacular wildlife are a big part of what makes our state so special and unique. Looming large in that tapestry of life is an animal essential to our forest and mountain ecosystems, the Colorado black bear. For a long time, it was reasonable to assume that even a lifelong Coloradan might never catch a glimpse of a bear because they are naturally wary of people. But with our population centers booming all across the state, human encounters with bears are on the rise, leading to increased conflict, property damage, human injuries, and perhaps, most tragically of all, bears being put down. Most Colorado bears are active from mid-March through early November. During late summer and early fall, bears enter a phase called hyperphagia, during which they will work hard to eat up to 20,000 calories a day to gain enough fat to survive the winter without eating or drinking. By early November, most of Colorado's bears will be asleep in their dens, and they won't emerge again for nearly 5 months. Can you imagine how hungry you would be waking up after 5 months of eating and drinking nothing? Bears can, and they do. Every March, they wake from their months-long torpor and set out to find something, anything, to satisfy their hunger pangs. Bears, when driven by food, are curious and hardworking. Food is their mission, and with a sense of smell 100 times stronger than that of a human, they are capable of catching the slightest scent on the softest breeze, even when the source is 5 miles away. It goes without saying, but to a bear there's no real distinction between what they enjoy eating and what they can use to satisfy their appetite. Even if it means coming into densely populated areas, suburbs, downtown commercial districts, anywhere food is plentiful and unsecured, there you'll find bears. Or at least bears trying to get at food. An exceptional sense of smell is not a bear's only superpower. When they find food, they never forget where it is and how easy it was to get. It isn't at all unreasonable to assume that once a bear has raided your trash can, he'll be back for more, and probably when you least expect it. Bears are resourceful and more dexterous than you might think. Who here doesn't know someone, maybe it's you, who's left an open bag of potato chips in a parked car overnight, only to return in the morning and find the car doors scratched or even torn off, the seats torn to shreds, and the bag of chips nowhere to be found? For Coloradans living in bear country, this situation is interchangeable in any number of ways across our geography. It might not be your car that gets raided, but your garage where you keep an unlocked freezer full of meat. An open window or door left open to let in the breeze at night. The compost bin filled with food scraps that you left in your driveway for morning pickup. Even something as innocent as a well-stocked bird feeder or the small latticework where you grow your grapes or your prized cherry tree, branches heavy with unpicked fruit. Unfortunately, property damage and an empty refrigerator may well be the least of concerns when it comes to hungry bears. When we fail to proactively secure our food, it can lead to bears becoming desensitized to people, which dramatically increases the risks that conflicts will be over more than food. Sadly, bears are often the ones who stand to lose the most in these scenarios. State policy is that if a bear is reported rummaging through your trash or breaking into your car or on your property, he or she will be relocated by Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and we're represented an excellent agency that is here today with us, including one of our commissioners. But if he returns again and tries his luck, he'll be considered too desensitized to human interaction, and it's likely he'll be put down. This outcome is especially heartbreaking when it's a mother bear with young cubs in tow. She may only be trying to find easy food to nourish her family, but she may pay for it with her life, leaving her cubs orphaned and at much higher risk for not surviving. So I am beyond excited to be here with you today because we are here to celebrate a new program that will go a long way in helping to reduce the risk of human-bear conflict. We are here today not only to encourage communities, but to give financial support from the state as they work to install bear-proof infrastructure and educate Coloradans about how to avoid the kinds of interactions that, at the very least, result in property damage, injuries to people, but all too often, and perhaps most tragically, the loss of life of these magnificent creatures. We all have a role to play, and with this new grant program, I know we can do better for our communities and better for our bears. I want to thank the Governor, the Department of Natural Resources for their work on this program, as well as all the communities who are stepping up to implement strategies that prioritize the health and wellness of Coloradans, our wildlife, and the wild spaces that make our state so unique. Thank you, and now I will turn it over to our wonderful and dedicated CPW Northeast Deputy Regional Manager, Kristen Cannon.
Thank you, Marlon. For decades, CPW has worked to address and prevent human-bear conflict in Colorado. Our researchers, our wildlife officers, our educators, our volunteers, and our customer service representatives have looked into the causes of conflict, have responded to reports of conflict, and have worked with the public to educate them on their role in preventing conflict, and not just relocations and lethal control. In this effort, we have the privilege to work with communities and individuals who are willing to take action to prevent conflict. Often these communities know what's best and have clearly identified solutions, but lack the resources to implement these solutions. On behalf of CPW, I'd like to thank the Governor and the state legislature for providing us with this really unique and novel opportunity to help communities implement solutions to human-bear conflicts. Additionally, I'd like to thank all of the applicants for their work, and even the ones whose projects we didn't fund and weren't able to fund, for their work to address human-bear conflict in their communities and for the time and effort it took to apply. We had a lot of really great proposals and worthwhile projects. And finally, I'd like to thank staff and especially the stakeholders who volunteered their time and expertise to help us develop this program and to evaluate proposals. And so with that, I'll have Brenda Lee come up, and she was an integral part of this entire process.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here. First of all, I'd like to thank Governor Polis for recognizing and supporting the efforts of local communities to reduce human-bear conflict, and also to CPW for recognizing and including the community in those efforts. Many people say it's a human problem, not a bear problem when it comes to human-bear conflict, and that is very true. And so what Colorado Bear Coalition and other nonprofits across the state that are working to reduce human-bear conflict, we're really looking at the human level and what's the human behavior that needs to change. And in ways that we do it proactively so that we reduce the chance of a bear coming into town and becoming a problem. So that CPW is not called to have to handle that bear and potentially put that bear down. It really comes down to the community working together to look at what their values are and what we can as a community do to reduce the chance of a bear being put down. We, Colorado Bear Coalition, so as Governor Polis had mentioned, I represent Boulder Bear Coalition, where we've made a lot of changes in Boulder, and I've worked quite a bit with Kristen and CPW. And we also have launched Colorado Bear Coalition, which is an organization that's a network of bear groups across the state so that we can help communities not feel alone in their efforts and not to have to reinvent the wheel, that there's things that one community may do that can really benefit another. So it's really about networking and collaborating and feeling empowered to actually make a change in our own local community to keep those bears from coming into town. And so this funding is critical in those efforts. Many of these groups lead efforts just on their own, and so having financial support to purchase trash receptacles, electric fencing, all kinds of things that require funds to do this, and the recognition at that state level to say that this is really important and that the community is a critical piece of that. So thank you to all who've made this happen, and I really look forward to working with all the recipients of the grant. Congratulations. And also to those who didn't receive funding. We are here to support and work with you in your efforts to meet your goals. Thank you so much.
So I want to acknowledge we're also joined by Dr. Carrie Hauser, the chair of Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission. Thank you so much for joining us, Carrie. And Melanie Hill, Community Fruit Rescue, another grant recipient, will say a few words about their work to prevent bear-human interactions.
Thank you, Governor Polis, and thank you, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, for offering this grant opportunity. I'm here to represent Community Fruit Rescue. We're a very small but mighty organization based here in Boulder. Our mission is to harvest the surplus fruit growing throughout the Boulder region, and this used to be an apple orchard over a century ago, and so we still have a lot of those remaining fruit trees here today. So we harvest that fruit that would otherwise fall to the ground and go to waste. We donate it to organizations in need, to people in need that really need that fresh fruit. And that fruit that would fall to the ground, it would attract animals like bears. And so we're removing those attractants from animals like black bears and keeping them safe and encouraging to stay in the natural habitats where it's a much safer space for them. We don't want them to stay here in town. In one of these harvests that I was at a few years ago, I'm reminded by talking to Kristen, I pulled up to a harvest I was going to lead, and I see her truck there, and I thought, we might not be alone. And sure enough, there was a sow and 2 cubs in one of the trees near a big pear tree we were about to harvest. And so that's just direct impact we're having there, and so we were able to protect that family. And this is what we're trying to do in the future, is keep these bears safe and protect the local community as well. And with this funding, as I mentioned, we're a very, very small organization. We're now able to launch our own wildlife coexistence program, where we'll be able to start up our bear conflict team, where we're going to have quick harvests where people are having bear activity, and so we can send volunteers and harvest leaders out there quickly to harvest the fruit and remove that attractant from black bears. We're also going to launch our do-it-yourself harvest kits, where we can really expand the reach of our harvest too. As I mentioned, we're mostly volunteer-led, and so by having the ability for people to self-harvest, we're going to have the opportunity to have more trees harvested throughout the Boulder region. And we're also able to start paying a small stipend to some of our harvest leaders just to incentivize the work that we're doing and get more people involved with us. We were only able to harvest a small fraction of trees last year, but still that was over 26,000 pounds of fruit we rescued and were able to give to people in need and remove from the bears. So we're just very grateful for this opportunity and looking forward to working with Colorado Parks and Wildlife and all our partners this year to continue our program and again keep bears safe and protect the local community as well. So thank you all again, and we're excited to be here.
Thank you, everybody.